A burst pipe. A dead water heater. The AC calling it quits. Who do you call? HomeServe is an easy way to handle unexpected home repairs, with plans covering stuff basic homeowners insurance usually won't. Instead of scrambling for a contractor, you make one call to get the repair process started. Join the millions of customers who trust HomeServe right now. Go to homeserve.com/podcast for 50% less your first year. That's homeserve.com/podcast. Savings compared to renewal price void in Florida.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. In the final days of April 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Hitler's bunker beneath the ruins of Berlin, among the last men still standing in its defense were French. Not German soldiers, not SS men from the Reich, Frenchmen. Citizens of a country that had been liberated by the Allies less than a year earlier. A country whose resistance fighters had died by the thousands for exactly the opposite cause. Were dying in the rubble of Berlin for a regime that had occupied their homeland for 4 years. They were members of the 33rd Waffen-SS Division of the SS, also known as the Charlemagne Division. And their story is one of the most disturbing and least discussed chapters of the Second World War. Our history brief today covers some recent history news. A quick word from our sponsors.
Your pet is your bestie, your therapist, your perfect match. It's easy to love them. It's easy to protect them, too, with pet insurance coverage from Pets Best. Because it's all fun and games until they chew on something they shouldn't. And you get a vet bill to match. With perfect timing, Pets Best helps protect your furry friend and your budget from this imperfect world. Get up to 90% cash back on eligible vet bills from less than $1 a day. Pets Best has plans to cover accidents, injuries, and more, from puppies and kittens to seniors. Find your perfect match plan and get a quote at petsbest.com. Pet insurance products offered and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC, are underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company or Independence American Insurance Company. For terms and conditions, visit www.petsbest.com/policy. Products are underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company, Independence American Insurance Company, or MS Transverse Insurance Company, and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC. $1 a day premium based on 2024 average new policyholder data for accident and illness plans, pets age 0 to 10.
This day in history. On June 15th, 1215, King John of England affixed his seal to the Magna Carta. Though originally intended to resolve a dispute between the king and his barons, the document became one of the foundational texts in the development of constitutional government and the rule of law. On June 15th, 1846, the United States and Great Britain signed the Oregon Treaty, peacefully settling a long-running boundary dispute in the Pacific Northwest, and thus establishing the U.S.-Canada border at the 49th parallel. Story of the day. To understand how French citizens came to wear the SS uniforms, we kind of have to understand the France that existed after June 1940. The fall of France was one of the most traumatic events in French national history. In 6 weeks, the French army, one of the largest in Europe, defending a country that had bled itself nearly to death, defeating Germany just 20 years earlier, collapsed completely. The shock was profound, and in its aftermath, a significant portion of French political and intellectual life drew a conclusion that seems almost incomprehensible in retrospect, but in 1940 was held by serious people across the French political spectrum. The conclusion was this: liberal democracy had failed. France had been defeated not merely militarily but ideologically. Its parliamentary system, its individualism, its failure to produce the national unity that modern war required. The Vichy regime that emerged under Marshal Philippe Pétain was not simply German occupation by another name. It was a French political project The attempt to build a new France on authoritarian, traditionalist, anti communist principles that many of its architects genuinely believed represented France's best future. Within that political culture, a further step was available to those willing to take it: active collaboration with Nazi Germany. And beyond that, for a smaller, more ideologically committed group, volunteering to fight for it. The French volunteers who eventually became the Charlemagne Division came from several directions. Some were committed fascists and anti Semites who had been politically active in France's pre war far right. Some were anti communists, men whose hatred of the Soviet Union overrode every other political consideration and who saw the war on the Eastern Front as a crusade against Bolshevism that transcended national loyalty. Some were adventurers, opportunists, or men whose circumstances in occupied France had made collaboration the path of least resistance. And some, a smaller number, were genuinely convinced that a Nazi dominated Europe represented a better future than the liberal order they had watched collapse in 1940. The first organized French volunteer unit, the LVF, was formed in 1941, shortly after Germany invaded the Soviet Union. It recruited several thousand men who were sent to fight on the Eastern Front under German command. The recruitment was actively supported by the Vichy regime and enthusiastically promoted by French collaborationist political parties. Posters appeared across occupied France, showing French soldiers fighting alongside German ones against the Soviet threat. It was presented with a cynicism that subsequent events would fully expose, as Frenchmen fighting for Europe rather than Frenchmen fighting for Hitler. By 1944, the various French volunteer formations had been consolidated and reorganized under the SS. The Charlemagne Division, named with a historical irony that bordered on the grotesque, for the medieval emperor who had united much of Western Europe, was formally established in early 1945. At its peak, it numbered approximately 7,000 men. It fought on the Eastern Front in Pomerania, where it suffered catastrophic losses against Soviet forces, and its survivors were eventually drawn back toward Berlin as the Reich collapsed around them. Their combat record on the Eastern Front was, by the objective standards of military performance, competent, to say the least. They fought hard. They died in significant numbers. They also served a regime that was, at the time they were fighting for it, operating the machinery of the Holocaust at full industrial capacity. That context does not disappear because they were effective soldiers. The final chapter of the Charlemagne Division was played out in the ruins of Berlin in April of 1945. A few hundred survivors, the remnant of a division that had started with thousands, made their way to the city for its final defense. Among them were men who had crossed the entire arc of collaboration, from the political saloons of occupied Paris to the frozen killing grounds of the Eastern Front to the smoking rubble of a capital city that was not theirs, defending a leader who was not their own in a war that had already been lost. When Soviet forces completed the capture of Berlin and the surviving Charlemagne men were taken prisoner, their Soviet captors were reportedly baffled. Why were Frenchmen here, they thought? The answer those men gave, that they were fighting communism, that they were defending European civilization, that they had made a choice they still believed in, was received by their captors with the contempt that it deserved. The reckoning that followed liberation was swift and brutal. Collaboration in France was punished through a wave of trials and extrajudicial violence. The purge that resulted in thousands of executions and the legal punishment of tens of thousands more. Members of the Charlemagne Division who survived and returned to France faced treason charges. Several were executed. Others received prison sentences. A small number escaped justice entirely, fleeing to Spain, South America, or simply disappearing into the post-war French society. The History Brief. Today on History News, we're heading into the cold waters of the North Pacific, where one of World War II's long-lost American submarines has finally been found more than 8 decades after it disappeared in combat. According to recent reporting, underwater archaeologists and naval historians have confirmed the wreck site of the USS Herring, a U.S. Navy submarine that was sunk in 1944 with all 83 crew members aboard. The USS Herring entered service in 1942 and served in both the Atlantic and Pacific theaters during World War II. Over the course of 8 war patrols, the submarine earned a reputation as an effective hunter, ultimately sinking 7 enemy vessels. Its final mission came in the spring of 1944. Operating near the Kuril Islands, a remote chain stretching between Japan and Russia, the Herring was conducting aggressive patrols against Japanese shipping. On the night of May 31st and the morning of June 1st, the submarine successfully attacked and sank multiple Japanese vessels anchored near the Matsuo Island. It was one of the most successful actions of the submarine's career. But success came at a terrible cost. Japanese shore batteries spotted the submarine and opened fire. Historical records indicate that 2 direct hits struck the vessel. Witnesses on shore reported seeing bubbles and a massive oil slick spread across the water's surface. Then, the submarine disappeared beneath the waves. No one survived. When the USS Herring failed to report back to Midway, it was officially declared lost. For decades, its exact resting place remained unknown. Families knew what had happened, but not where. Then came a breakthrough. A Russian expedition first located a submarine wreck near Matsuo Island in 2017. Years later, additional investigations and international cooperation between Russian, American, and Japanese researchers allowed experts to compare the wreckage's features with wartime records. The evidence was overwhelming. The submarine was indeed the USS Herring. Today, the wreck sits more than 300 feet below the surface, remarkably intact and still bearing visible signs of battle damage around its conning tower. The submarine rests upright on the seafloor, effectively frozen in time since the day it was lost. The U.S. Navy has designated the site as a protected war grave. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both of those links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. I also hope you guys check out our YouTube channel where we have different videos and series that are not part of this main feed. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.